Okay, this is not what my video for the College Board would be. Obviously, that has to be less than a minute, and really all you want to do with that is make sure it's running, show them that it works. Maybe if there's a couple of variations on the thing that it's supposed to do, show them all the variations, and then again, just sort of explain the purpose, the function. Maybe mention how it works quickly. You don't want to get into detail like I'm going to get into here. I just thought this would be a good idea to show you how this works moving forward so that when I do some of the other instructional videos, you know what's what. So this is a digitized version of a bowling dice game that my kids got for Christmas. Essentially, there's 10 dice. 3 of the dice have strikes on them, 3 of the dice have spares on them, and then all of the rest of the sides are either hit a pin or miss a pin. So here's the rules. Notice there's a first roll rule and a second roll rule. Meaning if you roll and you get a spare symbol in the first roll, you obviously can't get a spare in the first roll. Knocking all of the pins down is called a strike in the first roll. So if you get a spare symbol in the first roll, that just counts as a pin knockdown. Versus in the second roll, you cannot get a strike. So that counts as a pin knockdown. So essentially what I did is just change these symbols, strike being an X, pin being a pin, blank is nothing, and then spares a slash. I changed those to 1, 2, 3, and 4. And each of the dice has a certain number of these numbers. So essentially all I did was make a list, make an array for each of the dice. A 1 is a strike, a 2 is a miss, a 3 is a hit, a 4 is a spare, with those same rules from before. So in the first roll, if you get a 1, that's a strike. Doesn't matter how many 1s you get, it supersedes all of the other points. However, if you do not get a 1, if you get a 2, that counts for nothing. If you get a 3 or a 4, that counts for 1. In the second roll, if you get a 1 or a 3, that counts as a hit. 2 is still a miss. And if you get a 4 anywhere, it supersedes everything and just counts as a spare. Counts as all of the pins get knocked down. With all these ifs, it was kind of difficult to do. So what I did is, like I said, I set up a list, an array for each one of the dice. Like I had to make the ratio, the possibilities the same. I just couldn't say random number 1 through 4 because you would have an equal chance of getting a strike as you would of missing 1 pin. And that's not how the game works. The bowling dice game is 3 of the dice have a strike on them, and they only have them on one side. So I essentially had to make the first roll and the second roll. And the second roll depended on the first roll. So what I did is I set up a index for each one of the dice, and that would tell it which one of these 6 spots to pick. A random number of these 6 spots. Not a random number 1 to 4, but a random number of spot 1, spot 2, spot 3, spot 4, spot 5, or spot 6. It has to pick one of those 6 spots. So I did that for each one of them. And then when you roll, that's what it does. It picks one of those. Then I have to have another function about how to score that. So essentially just if anything is a 3 or a 4, that counts as a point. If any of them is a 1, that supersedes all of the other points and counts as a strike, counts as 10. For the second roll, if you don't get a strike, and this was the complicated part, this took me a little while to get, essentially I have to roll the remaining dice. Meaning I no longer have 10 dice to roll. I guess I could if I got a gutter ball the first time, if I got a 0 the first time, if I got all 2s the first time. But I have to roll it again, and again it depends on what I rolled the first time. So if I rolled a 4, I have to take those specific 4 dice out of the equation. I can't just go, oh, now I'm just rolling 6 dice because each one of the dice has a different set of numbers. Different strikes, misses, hits, and spares. What I did is when you hit roll again, it creates another array. It creates another list based on those 10 dice. But I added a function that basically says if any of the original dice had a hit, we're going to replace that number in this new array with a 0. And a 0 has no bearing on the score. So now if I got, I don't know, dice 2, 7, and 10 I got a hit on. When I hit a second roll, it will assign a 0 to dice 2, 7, and 10, meaning they're not going to have any bearing on the next part of the score. Now, if any of the remaining dice has a 4, that'll count as a spare, and that'll supersede all of their scores. The rest was just really making it look nice, some animation. So here I have a function called Pin Monkey that essentially changes what the pins look like. Like if I get 3 pins knocked down, the picture of the pins will have 7 pins standing. The same 7 pins. I guess I could have randomized it somehow, but I didn't want to take forever. I also have a function for the animation, so essentially I'm just taking that bowling ball and moving it up 1 pixel 385 times. And the rest are just really on events. So once you hit start, everything is in place. Once you hit the first roll button, it's only going to look at the first roll stuff. If you do not get a strike, another button will appear. If you do get a strike, that other button will not appear. Also, just for fun, I added like some sound effects. If you get a spare, if you get a strike, not a ton of stuff. But enough, definitely enough to warrant some pretty high scores on the create performance task. But I guess it all depends on my responses.